What happens when one of the most feared fighters in boxing history sits across from a talk show host who thinks he can push every button and get away with it? What you're about to witness is the most explosive late-night television moment that never made it to air. A clash so intense that security had to step in and Mike Tyson was escorted out of the studio. This is the untold story of how Jimmy Kimmel's arrogance and calculated disrespect pushed Iron Mike past his breaking point. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about late-night television. The bright studio lights blazed down on Jimmy Kimmel's familiar set as Mike Tyson settled into the guest chair, his massive frame making the furniture look almost childlike. The former heavyweight champion had agreed to this interview reluctantly, his publicist assuring him it would be a standard promotional appearance for his upcoming documentary. What Tyson didn't know was that Kimmel had spent hours with his writing, team crafting what he called his most savage interview yet. "So Mike," Kimmel began with that trademark smirk, "I have to ask about something that's been bothering me for years. You know, when you were in prison, did you ever think about how many people you disappointed? I mean, here you were, this role, model, and then boom, you're behind bars." Tyson's eyes narrowed slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Listen, Jimmy, that was a long time ago. I paid my debt to society. I learned from my mistakes. I'm a different person now." "Different person?" Kimmel leaned forward, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Come on, Mike, we've all seen the videos. The ear-biting, the interviews where you threaten to eat people's children. That's not really different, that's just older crazy." The studio audience let out nervous laughter, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was heading. Tyson shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening. "You know what, Jimmy? I came here to talk about my documentary, about my journey of redemption. If you want to keep bringing up old stuff, maybe we should talk about some of your old stuff." "My old stuff?" Kimmel's eyebrows shot up in exaggerated surprise. "Mike, I never bit anyone's ear off on national television. I never went to prison. For rape. I think there's a pretty big difference in our old stuff, don't you think?" The word rape hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Tyson's breathing became visibly heavier, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "You want to go there? Really? You're going to sit there in your little suit and your little desk and judge me?" "I'm not judging," Kimmel replied with false innocence. "I'm just asking questions that I think America wants answered. I mean, you talk about redemption, but some things you just can't come back from, right? Some things just make you damaged goods forever." "Damaged goods?" Tyson's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You think I'm damaged goods?" The tension in the studio was now palpable. Cameramen exchanged worried glances, and Kimmel's usual, cocky demeanor flickered for just a moment before he doubled down. "Well, Mike, I mean, let's be honest here. You're a convicted felon. You have anger management issues. You've made some pretty questionable life choices. If that's not damaged, then what is?" Tyson stood up slowly, his imposing 6-foot frame casting a shadow over Kimmel's desk. "You know what your problem is, Jimmy? You sit behind this desk every night thinking you're untouchable. You think because you got your little jokes and your little audience that you can say whatever you want to whoever you want." "Mike, please sit down," Kimmel said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier bravado. "We're just having a conversation here." "No, we're not having a conversation," Tyson shot back, his voice rising. "You're trying to humiliate me on national television. You brought me here under false pretenses so you could tear me down for your entertainment." Kimmel tried to regain control, gesturing to his audience. "Folks, this is live television. Anything can happen." He turned back to Tyson with renewed arrogance. "Mike, you're proving my point right now. This is exactly the kind of behavior that got you in trouble before. Can't handle a little tough questioning without losing your temper?" That was the moment. Everything changed. Tyson's eyes blazed with a fury that reminded everyone watching why he had once been the most feared man on the planet. Tough questioning? You call this journalism? You're nothing but a bully in an expensive suit, picking on people because you know they can't fight back. Can't fight back? Kimmel laughed, but it sounded forced now. Mike, you're literally famous for fighting back. That's literally what you do. Not here, I can't, Tyson replied, his voice gaining intensity. Not on your show, not with your cameras, not with your security. You brought me into your house so you could disrespect me, and I couldn't do anything about it. That's what cowards do, Jimmy. They stack the deck and then act tough. The studio had gone completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras still rolling. Kimmel's producers were frantically signaling from behind the cameras, but their host seemed determined to push this confrontation to its breaking point. Mike, I think you're being a little paranoid here. This is just entertainment. People expect a certain level of back and forth on a talk show. Entertainment? Tyson's laugh was cold and humorless. You think destroying someone's character for laughs is entertainment? You think bringing up the worst moments of someone's life to get a cheap reaction is entertainment? Kimmel's face flushed red as he realized his carefully orchestrated ambush was backfiring spectacularly. But instead of backing down, he made the fatal mistake of doubling down on his attack. Mike, you're acting like I'm making this stuff up. These are facts. These are things that actually happened. And if you can't handle people talking about your past, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Handle it? Tyson stepped closer to the desk, his presence now dominating the entire studio. I've been handling questions about my past for 30 years. But there's a difference between asking questions and trying to destroy someone for ratings. Destroy. You? Kimmel's laugh was sharp and cruel. Mike, you destroyed yourself a long time ago. I'm just reminding people what kind of person you really are underneath all this redemption tour nonsense. The audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something that had gone far beyond entertainment into genuinely dangerous territory. But Kimmel, drunk on his own perceived power, kept pushing. I mean, let's be real here. You come on these shows talking about how you've changed, how you've found peace, but we all know it's just an act. The real Mike Tyson is standing right here, ready to explode at the first sign of real scrutiny. Real scrutiny? Tyson's voice was now barely controlled rage. You call this real scrutiny? A real journalist would ask about my charity work, my efforts to help young fighters, my documentary about overcoming addiction and trauma. You're not a journalist, Jimmy. You're a parasite feeding off other people's pain. Kimmel's mask slipped completely then, revealing the ugly truth beneath his polished television persona. You know what, Mike? You're right. I'm not a journalist. I'm an entertainer. And you know what entertains people? Watching tough guys like you get exposed as frauds. Watching you squirm when someone doesn't buy into your sob story. Sob story? Tyson's hands were now visibly shaking, not with fear but with barely contained fury. You think my life is a sob story? You think everything I've been through, everything I've overcome, is just material for your comedy show? Pretty much, yeah, Kimmel replied with breathtaking callousness. I mean, come on. The troubled childhood, the abusive trainer, the prison time, the addiction, the bankruptcy. It's like a greatest hits album of self-destruction. And now you want us all to applaud because you managed not to completely destroy your life? That's not inspirational, Mike. That's just basic human decency. The studio crew was now openly staring in horror at their host. This had gone far beyond anything they had ever witnessed on the show. But Kimmel seemed oblivious to the line he had crossed, intoxicated by what he perceived as his dominance over the legendary fighter. You know what I think, Mike? I think you came here tonight expecting everyone to kiss your ring, to treat you like some kind of hero. But the truth is, you're just a cautionary tale. A reminder of what happens when you let your worst impulses control your life. Tyson was breathing heavily now, his entire body radiating dangerous energy. You don't know anything about my life. You don't know what I've been through, what I've survived, what I've built. You sit in your comfortable little world making jokes about things you could never understand. I understand plenty, Kimmel shot back. I understand that you're a has-been, trying to stay relevant by pretending you've changed. I understand that deep down, you're still the same angry, violent man you always were. And I understand that right now you're proving it to everyone watching. You want to see violent? Tyson's voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than his earlier shouting. You really want to see what violent looks like? For the first time since the interview began, Kimmel looked genuinely afraid, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. Are you threatening me, Mike? On live television? Because that would really prove my point, wouldn't it? That underneath all this redemption talk, you're still just a thug who solves problems with violence. I'm not threatening you, Tyson replied, his voice now eerily calm. I'm educating you. You see, Jimmy, you've spent your whole career hiding behind this desk, hiding behind your writers, hiding behind your audience. You've never had to face the consequences of your words because you've never said them to someone who could actually do something about it. Kimmel tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out strangled and fake. Mike, you're on television right now. There are cameras rolling. There's an audience watching. You can't actually do anything to me, can't I? Tyson smiled, but it was a smile that contained no warmth, no humor, only the promise of violence. You know what I've learned in my 50-plus years on this planet, Jimmy? There are always consequences. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but always eventually. The studio security team was now moving closer, clearly recognizing the volatility of the situation. But Kimmel, perhaps sensing his authority slipping away, made one final catastrophic decision to escalate. You know what, Mike? You're absolutely right. There are always consequences. And the consequence of being a violent criminal is that people like me get to call you out on it. The consequence of destroying your own life is that you don't get to control how people talk about it. Tyson stepped back from the desk, his demeanor shifting from rage to something far more dangerous, a cold, calculating fury. You think you're calling me out? You think this little performance of yours is some kind of public service? Let me tell you what this really is, Jimmy. This is a sad little man trying to make himself feel important by tearing down someone who's actually lived a life. Lived a life? Kimmel's voice cracked slightly. You call what you've done living a life? You've hurt people, Mike. You've traumatized people. You've left a trail of victims behind you wherever you've gone. And what trail have you left, Jimmy? Tyson's question hung in the air like a challenge. What have you built? What have you overcome? What battles have you fought? You sit here every night making jokes about people who've actually done things, actually taken risks, actually lived. You're a spectator trying to judge the players. The audience was now completely transfixed, watching what had become less an interview than a philosophical and psychological battle between two fundamentally different men. Kimmel, realizing he was losing control of the narrative, made his final, desperate play. You know what, Mike? Kimmel's voice took on a vicious edge as he prepared to cross the ultimate line. Since we're talking about living life and taking risks, let's talk about the biggest risk you ever took. Let's talk about that night in Indianapolis. Let's talk about what you did to that 18-year-old girl. The studio went dead silent. Even the camera operators stopped moving. Tyson's face went completely blank, a look more terrifying than any rage he had shown so far. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible but carried the weight of absolute menace. What did you just say? Kimmel, either too stupid or too arrogant to recognize the mortal danger he had just put himself in, pressed forward. I said let's talk about your rape conviction. Let's talk about how you destroyed an innocent young woman's life because you couldn't control yourself. Let's talk about the real Mike Tyson, not this sanitized version you're trying to sell. What happened next would be talked about in television circles for years to come. Tyson didn't explode in the way everyone expected. Instead, he became unnaturally still, his breathing slowing to an almost meditative rhythm. When he finally spoke, his words cut through the studio like a blade. "Jimmy, you just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic little life." "Did I?" Kimmel's bravado was now obviously forced, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "Because I think I just did what real journalists are supposed to do. I asked the hard questions that everyone else is too scared to ask." "No," Tyson replied, his voice gaining power with each word. "What you just did was reveal exactly who you are. You're not a journalist, you're not an entertainer, you're a predator. You brought me here specifically to humiliate me, specifically to drag me through the worst moment of my life for your sick entertainment." The security team was now openly positioning themselves, but Tyson seemed oblivious to their presence, his entire focus locked on Kimmel. "You want to know about that case, Jimmy? You want to know what really happened? I spent 3 years in prison for something I maintained my innocence on. 3 years of my life gone, my career destroyed, my reputation ruined. And you think that's comedy material?" Kimmel tried to backtrack, finally sensing he had gone too far. "Mike, I'm just doing my job here. These are matters of public record. If you can't handle people discussing your criminal history, maybe you shouldn't be doing public appearances." "My criminal history?" Tyson's laugh was cold as ice. "Let's talk about criminal history, Jimmy. Let's talk about how you lure people onto your show under false pretenses. Let's talk about how you ambush guests for ratings. Let's talk about how you make money by destroying people's dignity. Which one of us is really the criminal here?" The audience was now clearly uncomfortable, some people actually getting up to leave. But Kimmel, perhaps sensing this was his moment to create television history, refused to back down. "The difference is, Mike, I've never been convicted of rape. I've never been to prison. I've built my career through talent and hard work, not through intimidation and violence." That was the moment Tyson finally snapped. Not into violence, but into something far more devastating, a complete psychological dismantling of everything Kimmel represented. "Talent? You call this talent? You call ambushing guests and humiliating them for laughs talent? You're nothing but a bully, Jimmy. A coward who hides behind cameras and security guards while you torture people for entertainment." Tyson began walking around the desk, not aggressively, but with the calm confidence of a man who had finally found his target. "You know what I see when I look at you, Jimmy? I see a little boy who got picked on in school and never got over it. I see someone so insecure, so desperate for approval, that you'll destroy other people just to feel powerful for 5 minutes." "Security!" Kimmel called out, his voice cracking with panic. But Tyson wasn't advancing threateningly. He was simply walking, speaking in measured tones that were somehow more frightening than any physical aggression could have been. "You want to call security?" Tyson smiled that cold smile again. "Go ahead, call them. But they can't protect you from the truth, Jimmy. And the truth is that you're nothing. You're a parasite who feeds off real people's pain because you've never had the courage to live a real life yourself." Security personnel were now moving in, but Tyson held up his hands, showing he meant no physical harm. "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt your precious host. I don't need to. He's already destroyed himself tonight." Everyone watching just saw the real Jimmy Kimmel, the cruel, pathetic little man hiding behind the jokes and the smile. "Mike, you need to leave," one of the security guards said firmly, but respectfully. "This interview is over." Tyson nodded calmly. "You're absolutely right. This interview has been over since the moment it started. This was never an interview, it was an execution. Jimmy brought me here to kill my reputation, to humiliate me on television. But you know what happened instead?" He turned to face the cameras directly, ignoring Kimmel completely. "Everyone got to see what happens when a bully picks on the wrong person." As security began to escort him out, Tyson stopped and turned back to Kimmel one final time. "Jimmy, you spent tonight trying to convince everyone that I'm still the same angry, violent man I used to be. But you know what you really proved? You proved that I've grown, that I've changed, that I can handle ignorance and cruelty without resorting to violence. And you prove that underneath your nice guy television persona, you're exactly the kind of person I used to be. Angry, cruel, and taking it out on anyone you think can't fight back. Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, his carefully constructed image crumbling before millions of viewers. "This is my show," he managed weakly. "You can't just—" "Your show?" Tyson interrupted, as security gently but firmly guided him toward the exit. "This stopped being your show the moment you decided to ambush a guest. This became my show, and I just gave everyone watching a masterclass in how to handle a bully." As Tyson reached the edge of the stage, he called out one final time, "Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed was supposed to be entertainment. But what it really was a revelation. You got to see how your beloved late-night host treats people when he thinks he has all the power. Remember this moment the next time you watch this show, because now you know who Jimmy Kimmel really is." The studio erupted in chaos as Tyson disappeared backstage, leaving Kimmel sitting alone at his desk, his career potentially in ruins, his true nature exposed for all the world to see. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of his humiliation. The tables completely turned on the man who thought he could destroy Iron Mike Tyson. So there you have it. The untold story of how Mike Tyson turned the tables on Jimmy Kimmel and exposed him for what he really was. What do you think? Was Tyson justified in his response? Or did Kimmel cross a line that should never be crossed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth behind the cameras.